Hey guys, so I'm back here after spending a little while texturing the roughness um, and just working on it so you guys could kind of see what I did here. Let's switch over to our roughness channel and give this a second. Oh, and if you're wondering how I got the background to be blurry and stuff, there's actually an option for your environment down here where you can control the lighting and stuff. You can rotate, but there's also a blur. So I just find it a little easier to work when the background's a little blurry. And we're going to switch out of the shader, and down here we're going to switch to current layer and below, so you guys could really see what is going on in the roughness maps. And so it's nothing particularly crazy. I just broke up using groups, kind of like Photoshop group layers, and just added procedurals and base colors in here. So, for example, if we go down to the bottom layer, I just used the flat color. I color picked from the baked texture map. So here's our baked texture map. And then I just kind of flooded it with the color. I added some procedural noise, a cloud, to get some subtle breakup in there. Use some cellular to get further breakup. And then on this cellular, there's a mask in here to break up that shape. And then on top of the light base metal, I didn't use a mask since this is our base for our group. But then on our next group, there's a mask on the entire group so that only the dark spots get selected. And so those masks, like I mentioned earlier, they're made using the groups that we made in Houdini. And you guys can make your own. You can just make selections with the selection tools and select your own. So then now I added this new dark layer, and again, you can see that there's some variation in the roughness inside of here. You can see that there's a Perlin noise, and there's also just the base kind of color. Same thing for the dark metal group on top, which is this layer down here, this stuff. So you can see this has a little different variation of noise. And finally our glass, which is up here. And that's just a subtle amount of noise also inside of here. You could barely really see it. It's not really that obvious, but that's okay because I want it to not be that rough. I want it to be mostly transparent. Yeah, and so that kind of covered all the roughness, and so you guys could see how I broke up those layers. And so I went ahead and did the same thing for metalness and our diffuse group. So if we come to our layers here, you can see that I have those groups split up, but there's nothing in there yet really, except for the base colors. So if we go to the top of all our layers, you can see that this is just our flat base colors that we've got going on in here. And so I'm going to show you guys some of those, some of the different techniques while I work on the base color, but I'm also going to work on bump. So I decided to make a bump channel. Right now it's completely blank. And so I'm going to show you guys how to come in here and add some details. And something I forgot to mention was sometimes if you are moving around, the default Mari camera system gets a little weird. So if you go to display, and this is where you get your display properties. We have our HUD, which is this down here. I honestly keep it open all the time. Some people don't like it. I like it because it kind of gives you hotkeys and information about your scene. There is, where is it at? Thought it was in here. Show environment, render camera, render UV, fill render. And it's not in there. Where was it? View, layout, take approach, camera, painting, shading. It's in the preferences. Preferences. Oh yeah, navigation. So inside your preferences and your navigation, this is where you guys could change from Mari to Maya or whatever. Mari and Maya basically have the same hotkeys, so I don't really change it. There's this option on the orbit to lock to world up. By default, this is disabled, and this can get really annoying. So if you click OK, watch, I'll just show you. If we start rotating, you see how it's doing some like weird, it's like rotating all weird, you know, rotating around like this. And that can get pretty annoying. So I tell everybody, and yeah, I forgot to mention that when we first started, opened up Mari. Under your preferences for navigation, always choose lock to world up. It just makes navigation feel more like traditional applications in 3D. Without it, it gets just really confusing. So something to keep in mind. Okay, cool. So if we are now in our bump layer, here we go, and if we switch over to visualizing our bump, so if I were to actually, let's switch over to our shader mode. And inside of here, I start painting, for example, black. Switch over to black here, and I start painting. You'll see how it dents our building. So if I move around, you guys can see how it kind of added that indentation. So let's undo. We're going to add some details to all of our surface. And so in order to add details, we're going to use this really cool app that's free. I've mentioned it before to you guys. It's called J-Displacement. And so you guys just look that up, J-Displacement. It's really neat. It makes making really cool tiled texture maps really easy to build, basically. So we're going to use something maybe like this. And, you know, we could generate a new one, make adjustments. Maybe we want less background iterations. You know, whatever, right? And so this gives you lots of options. There's also like, you can load in a custom sprite. You could use the classic set. So this lets you change the pattern of the sprites. So give it a second to work. And you'll see that this is the new shapes. And there's several different ones. There's also J-Displacement wire. So if you click here, render, this gives us this weird pattern here. Maybe we only want two. You know, you can invert it, whatever, right? So there's all these options this is going to let us make. So I'm going to make a few of these that I think might look cool using J-Displacement. And then we're going to use that to add detail to our bump map onto our structure surface. And yeah, I mean, there's just tons of options here. You could change the directions, the width to be random, linear. Tons of options here. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna just pause it because I mean, this is just gonna me be clicking randomly to generate cool looking shapes. And once I have a few, I'll show you guys how to texture bomb basically your geometry, and we'll be painting in and out some of those details. So I'll be right back. Alright guys, so I made 3. These are 8K. They always spit out as 8K, which is great. Good amount of resolution. 3 maps. So there's this one, and this one. I think we're going to use this one. And since they're all seamless, they tile, which is good. This makes it easy to blast all over our structure. So we're going to use this. I think this will be a good bump map, starting map. And then I'll probably take these into Photoshop and we'll add a gradient map to add color to this, but the colors will match what we have in here already, just to make things a little easier for our diffuse painting stage. I might not do that. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. So Cool, we're in bump map. Let's see what happens if we oh, and just so you guys know, another thing that's cool, just like Houdini and just like Nuke, if you guys are in the layer system and hit tab, this lets you type in whatever. So if you start typing in color, different nodes come up, and so all your options are in here. I'm not going to use that because I sometimes forget them, and also I'm not trying to show you guys all the shortcuts. That's up to you guys. There's plenty of Mari tutorials out there. You guys should learn those little hotkeys and make your own. So I want to show you guys just the basics and how to do it all. So anyways, what we're going to use is a procedural. So down here, procedural layer. And I might decide to split this into only certain parts. So maybe the bump map will be a little larger in these brown areas. I'm not entirely sure yet. We'll figure out how to do that right now if we want to change it. And so there's a couple options here for projecting as a cube map, triplanar, which is useful. There's the geometry if you want to use ambient occlusion, stuff like that. And I can show you guys how to do that. That would require we use the where is it at? The Modo render option. And so this is if you need a bake out ambient occlusion or curvature. I would rather, honestly, we're probably going to do that in Photoshop. I'm not Photoshop, in Houdini using the redshift ambient occlusion and curvature. So I'm not going to use it here at the texture painting phase, but that is an option. Procedural. Then here you got all your procedural stuff. We're going to use tiled. So down here under pattern, tiled, if you hit tiled, that lets you load in your own texture map. And so what we need to do inside of our image manager, let's actually pull this to the side. We need to load in, snap it over here. We need to load in some textures. So I need to copy paste those textures that I just made. And we're going to just cut them and paste them into our Mari folder, our project Mari folder. So I'll be right back to do that. And so here we've got our Mari folder. So I'm going to cut. And we'll just call this, we'll make a new folder in here. Textures. Just to better organize stuff. And I'm going to just rename these. We're going to just say JS Tech Tex 01. So it's a tech texture. And we'll call this number 2 and number 3. And we're going to just drag and drop these in right there. I'm going to give this a second to process. Since they are 8K, they might take a little bit to bring in. And so, yeah, while that goes on, we're going to end up using one of those textures inside of here, inside of our procedural tiling. And so what this node does is it tiles across all your image the texture that's loaded. Kind of like a triplanar mapping, if you guys know what triplanar mapping does. So it lets you project on all angles across all of the geometry the texture. So it's pretty neat. It's really useful. So I'm going to just pause this because this is taking a little bit to process. It's on the second one, but you know, it might take another couple seconds. So I'm going to pause. All right, so we're back. It just took like another minute. We're going to load in this one, I think, into here, and let's just see what happens. And again, this is 8K, so obviously when you're working with an 8K file, you know, it takes a little time to load things up and do things. Okay, here we go. So it already kind of plopped in. And as you can see, it added a little bit of textural detail here. And in fact, could switch this over to scalar data, but I think that's fine. We'll close that. Let's move around. And so you can see that this added already some pretty cool little details here to our structure. And so let's just real quick check out what this looks like with it on and off. So off, on. I definitely like it on. So we're going to keep this on. And I think this is actually pretty nice scale. And we might do another version that's a little weaker at smaller scale. Or not necessarily smaller, but duplicating more. And yeah, I think this is kind of cool. All these little details here. And so if we're looking at it like this in our render, these little bumps and stuff will go, you know, add a little extra detail that we might like. Let's duplicate this. Yeah, we'll duplicate this, and then we'll see if we could see what we get. So let's paste. And we'll make this even smaller, and we'll make this a multiply so that it multiplies it on top. But let's repeat it. Let's try a repeat of 5. And we could try to invert this also, just to see kind of what we get. Right now it's a little too strong. So up here, there's a slider that you could slide down, and this kind of, it's like opacity in Photoshop. So I think we'll keep this, and we'll make it a multiply. So darken, multiply. Let's just kind of see what we get here. Let's do 0.5. And we'll repeat this even more. Let's just try a repeat of 10. Just to really come in here and get those nice little small details. And we're going to flip this. So let's mirror it vertically, just so we kind of get and mirror it the other way so it doesn't match the same layout as the one beneath it. Maybe we could rotate this even, and let's just see what happens. Actually, no, I think it looks better without any rotation, so we'll keep it that way. And yeah, this added just tons of little paneling detail, you know, that would have taken forever to paint. And now it's all kind of in there, which is cool. I think we could add a little extra noise inside of our bump, like a little bit of procedural noise. So I think we're going to try that next. So let's come in here and we'll make another procedural. And this time we're going to use a procedural. Could try turbulence or cloud. Cloud's really nice. Could also try a cellular. Let's try cellular. Let's just see what we get. Give this a second to process. So cellular has several different models. So if we zoom in here, you can see what this is doing. It's kind of like indenting. And so there's the Manhattan model. There's the Euclidean, the Chebyshev. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not entirely sure. I think this one will work for us since it gives us little boxes. So it's kind of like techie. And then this one gives us some weird like diamond kind of shape, which is really interesting. But well, we might actually try, or we might try this the F1. So for the distance, well, let's try F2. Let's see what we get. It's a different pattern. This is really, really exotic. F1. No, let's try Chebyshev again. F2. I think we'll stick with F1. But our scale's a little big. But let's see. Let's see if we multiply this on top. Darken, multiply. This gives us some interesting results. But I think it's a little too strong. But let's see. Let's drop the strength down a little bit. It's kind of cool. Maybe let's make the size a little smaller. Let's try 0.25. Let's do half as small of a pattern. That might be a little too small. Well, let's go bigger and just see what we get. That's actually kind of neat too. So you can see where the light's reflecting right here. The kind of look that we're getting. You got to keep in mind in real life, all these little changes, that equals roughness. So we don't want to, you know, make this too rough. Then we might lose some of that reflection in our final render. But it is kind of cool. So I think we'll bring it in just a bit. Just to kind of give us variation on our surfaces. Nothing really in the real world is perfectly smooth. Unless, you know, it's like a show car or something. And even that, after a couple hours of being, you know, covered in dust and stuff, there's variations on the roughness. So I think this is neat. Okay, we've got something cool now. You know, and look how easy that was to kind of make. We just tiled a neat looking texture. We did 2 of them. We increased and decreased their strength. We multiplied them on top, and then we used a procedural noise to further break up our shapes underneath. And I think we'll maybe let's just see what happens if we make this a little. No, I think this is good. Actually, no, I think this is cool. So yeah, you guys saw how I kind of just quickly photo bombed it with just textures, just 2 quick simple textures, and we've got some nice shapes and variations. And of course, you know, like I said, guys, this is going to be an asset that we're seeing from way out. You know, it's going to be like this big in 2K, but those little details will help sell the shot. So I think our next step now is to go ahead and work on the diffuse a little bit to kind of just break up our diffuse colors. So I think we'll end up using this cellular. And let's see here. Our angle is something like this. Or we might actually just paint manually some textures in here using some of the brushes. So right now I have the brush tool selected. And there's the blur tool, vector paint. All the tools that have these little arrows, they have different options. And if the K key pulls up, this is like the quick brush hotkey. So you can see there's a couple brushes here. It's the same thing as if you guys went over here and checked out the where's it at? Not the image manager, the shelf. Yeah, so it's like clicking the shelf tool, except it's a mini version. We're probably going to use, let's just see the default. And one of the neat things you could do, let's switch over back to our diffuse color now. And actually, let me save. So I'm going to save. Go to our channels, go back to our diffuse. And we're going to paint on top of the dark gray a little bit. So I believe that is this color. Let me make sure. Yeah, so that's this color here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some damage, I guess, a little bit of variation on edges or on the center. So there's several ways we could approach this. Now the painting tool, there's this really neat option under here. Where is it? Sorry guys, I'm still kind of getting used to the new menu because in Mari 4 and 4.5 they added all this. So if you guys are coming from the old Mari, yeah, it's kind of confusing. There's a lot of stuff changed, but it's easier to navigate in my opinion now. Where is it? Projectors? No. Pad objects. Image manager history. Patches, painting. Oh yeah, here we go. Under the painting tab. So the painting tab, this let's snap this over here. Painting tab is basically your, what's the word? Like your frame buffer, I guess. The Mari doesn't paint on the normals of your polygons like Substance Painter and other painting tools. It paints using, like, imagine like a piece of glass is in front of the screen. And I think I could actually, yeah, okay, here we go. If you hold the Z key or the Z key if you're from somewhere else, if you're from the UK, you can see if when I zoom in and out, you'll notice this like new window pops up. This is your painting surface. So if I zoom out more, just so you guys can see, and I press the P key to paint, and let's just say I draw a line here, and for some reason it's not drawing. Oh, it's because I'm on color. Let me just make a new layer here. So if I start painting this black, why are you not painting? Above everything. There we go. So I start painting. You'll notice that I can't paint outside of that view. Now, some people, they like to just keep that full screen. I'm one of those people. I don't really care if I could see this, but if you hold the Z key, that lets you go in or out. You're not actually zooming. You're zooming in or out of the painting surface. So think of this as like a piece of glass, and you're painting on the glass, and then when you're done, it projects it onto the surface, similar to projection painting in a matte painting. So that's why people like to use Mari for matte painting. So anyways, the cool idea of this is inside of here, there's a couple options that let you paint here without baking down. So automatically in Mari, as soon as you rotate, it's like baking down what you painted by default. And there's a hotkey for baking. It's the B key, but there's an option to disable that. And so the reason why you would want to do that is I'll give you an example right now. The underneath the paint buffer here, and that's what that. Oh yeah, that's what that's called. It's the paint buffer. Where were we? There's the resolution, the color depth, stuff like that, and if you want to rotate it and whatnot. But then there's this option right here to reset on bake. And so what that does is that means yes, it's automatic. So when you bake, it automatically clears your paint, right? And the option down here is the bake behavior. So there's auto bake and clear. So right here you could switch that to clear only or manual. And so some people like to use manual. And so what does that mean? Basically, if I drew now, why is it not drawing? Oh, God, it moved the layer again. Move that back up. Here we go. And actually, let's just delete this layer. Let's make a new one. Or we'll undo it. No, let's delete. Remove layer. Let's make a new layer. Let's move that up to the top. And so you see how we have this right here. Now if I move, because we have it set on manual mode, it lets you completely move the it's like the pieces on a piece of glass, and it doesn't get cooked onto the surface until you bake it down. So right now if I press the B key, it baked it, and since it's on manual mode, it doesn't automatically clear the piece of glass, the paint buffer. And so you can press B again, move down, press B again, move down, press B again. And so you can see how this is really useful if you need to make a tiling or repeating pattern. And so this lets you, move around and apply the same thing without having to manually kind of draw it in all over again. So that's something to keep in mind. And so the B key, when you're in manual mode, you hit the B key to bake, and that's just that's one of the keys. And then the clear, by default to clear, it's Control Shift C. So right now you can see that I still have that that line activated. So if you hit Control Shift C, that clears it, and now we're back to this is baked down and our paint buffer is empty. So you guys can add that to another hotkey if you guys work with a stylus like a Wacom tablet. That'll make things easier if you have hotkeys and stuff. And so yeah, like I said, I haven't set up any of my hotkeys. I just installed this fresh because I like to install all my apps with just fresh, so that way there's no problems. And I also wanted to show you guys the how it would feel if you just started brand new a Mari file. So let's remove this. And so yeah, right now, that's an option. I'm not going to be doing any repeating, I don't think, so I'm going to just keep it back to auto bake and clear. But just so you guys have that, you guys know that that's an option. Some people only paint like this. Some people only paint in manual mode. I kind of switch between the two when I need them. And there's another really neat feature in here, the masking tools. So you can activate or disable masking. And how masking works is it's kind of like in Photoshop, there's the quick mask tool, and it's not like making a full mask up here in your layers. It's just a quick mask, like a fast masking system. And so this right now, it's masking is enabled, the preview, and it's going to preview this color. So if you come down here to edge mask, and there's a couple different masking types, but the one that everybody uses usually is edge mask. And you activate it, so there's this little switch. And we turn it on. It's going to take a little second to work. But what it does is it masks all your edges. So we'll see kind of what's going on. See, here we go. We've got these edges right here. And so you can adjust that fall off to be a little different. So you could have it like start further in, kind of like that. And so that just makes it so you don't, if you're working, you don't get paint over here. So if I were to, let's switch over to our dark, here we go, our dark paint. And let's move down here, make a new layer. If I were to start painting here and hit the B key and move over, it should, you could see that it started to mask it where it got lighter and lighter and lighter going this way. So that's what that does. And it's really useful for curvature, or to, so that way if you paint here, you know, you don't get it on this side of the edge right here. Really, see? So that's what that's for. That's really useful when you're, I use that a lot. And you, like I said, you could adjust the fall off curve. There's a bazillion options in here. You can come in here and adjust the direction, and so like if we wanted to, I don't know, make it fall off a little sharper or smoother. There's just a lot of ways you could kind of adjust this and tweak the curvature. I'm gonna just keep it at default for now. Something like that. And you can change the color of the preview. So that's if you want to mask your edges. There's a couple other options in here, like ambient occlusion, as you guys could guess. That's gonna mask your ambient occlusion, so your ambient occlusion all over your model. I use this a lot too. So if I only want to work on certain surfaces, and let's see here. This model's huge, so the values aren't probably, what? Here, come on. Invert, let's see. So this is our inverted ambient occlusion, and we really come in here, adjust the curve. And this just lets you kind of mask in the ambient occlusion. There's also depth. The fractal noise is a really useful one. This is like a quick fractal. So let this load. And so as you guys could barely probably see it, but if we come in here, and actually let me close that. Let's see, increase the size. You guys could, hopefully you guys can see it. The color's kind of tough, but you could see the noise is moving around, and so this lets you make a quick kind of noise mask. And you could adjust the contrast, less, more, how rough it is, smooth, extra rough, the size. You can invert it. Mask them out, so if you want it to be a whole lot, like opacity kind of. And so I'm going to use this right now to actually paint in some of that diffuse detail here. So yeah, let's get painting on that. So we're gonna paint on top of this dark gray here. So yeah, we're gonna just come in here, color pick, and that's the C key. I'm gonna switch over to the P key for project, and like I said, guys, there's all those little hotkeys are down here. If you don't know some of them, or if you're barely learning, and there's obviously all those options are up here also, so you can increase the radius, the opacity, stuff like that. And so if you just hit the O key, it lets you increase or decrease your brush radius. Or actually, this is the opacity. O is opacity, R is radius. There we go, forgot. So yeah, that lets you just quickly kind of increase or decrease the size. Let's actually try a little different kind of shader. Maybe this might work a little better. So it's already getting mixed in there, and we're going to switch over our color. Currently something a little darker. Just to kind of break up our look. And we're going to disable the mask preview since we already know it's on and it kind of where it's at. And we're going to just come in here and kind of paint some of those details. And come to think of it, I think that instead of going darker, I'm going to go lighter. So let's actually switch that color up. Let's go a little bit lighter. And yeah, just to kind of break up the shape a little, hit F1. And you guys can see that that's just kind of the variation that we're getting in there. And obviously we could maybe try to do this with just noises, and that might be enough. So let's give that a shot and just see. Instead of manually coming in here and painting everything. For speed purposes, maybe we'll do that. So let's try to use a procedural noise. And that's something that I will say, Mari's better at not painting. As weird as that sounds. Like, you don't want to paint everything manually in Mari. You want to use the procedurals and all the photo manipulation stuff. While Substance Painter is more of a painter app. Like, you could paint manually more. So I would recommend, if you're more into painting stylized textures and stuff, Substance Painter will be better for you. If you're into painting more of the photo and that kind of method, use Mari. And also for matte painting purposes, it's better. And actually, let's copy paste this color here. What is this? So let's select that. And yeah, it's currently selected. And we'll come up to the cloud and we'll just drag that down. And we'll drag it down on both, actually. And just to make sure it's the same color, let me switch over, and it's not, so we'll color pick that and drop it down. And let's disable that. Let's see what color. This is a nice little bit darker. Let's try that. That might be a little too dark. Let's check it out. If we turn that off. Yeah, I think that's a little too dark, so let's blend it down with a base layer. That's okay. Let's come up here and see what we've got. Okay, that's cool. You know what? We won't even have to paint those details in. Like I said, let's use the procedurals when we can use the procedurals. And if we need to manually add details, we'll do that. But I think the procedural cloud noise is giving us just enough variation where it's subtle enough. So let's do that. We'll do that. Let's come back down here. For the brown material, we're going to use this brown color here. So let's color pick this color. We're going to come down here, add a new procedural, fractal cloud. We're going to drop it down on both. And for some reason, there we go. And we're going to make one a little bit darker. We'll adjust the size. Something that works for us. And of course we could layer, like we did on the bump map, we could layer even more details in there. And let's tone this down. Let's check it out. Let's see, completely off. Let's be a subtle kind of thing. Might be a little too strong on this, so let's tone that down just a little bit more, like that. Increase the roughness a little bit. Hit the F3 key, switch back over. Down just a little bit more. And let's do the same thing. And actually I think this is an empty layer, so let's remove that. And let's color pick this whitish color. And once again, we'll drop down the procedural cloud. We'll plug that in there. Plug that in there. Let's make this a little bit darker. Increase the scale. I can't even really see it. So let's make it a little darker again. Make it a little rougher. And that's obviously going to be too strong, but bring it in just a little bit. And actually, let's get rid of this painting and disable our fractal noise now. We don't need this panel open. Let's hit Control S. Let's check out our UVs. So if we zoom in here, you can see that there's some variations. It's subtle. And yeah, you know, I could spend hours in here kind of messing around, layering details and layering more and painting and layering. Something that I want to show you guys is the quick project system. So in order to do that, we're gonna check out that angle. And I believe angle number 5 is what we're going to want to use. Let me see. Oh no, we want this way. So angle 6. Yeah, angle 6. Okay. So something pretty neat about the quick project is it lets you paint. It's going to save out this shot and lets you paint directly inside of Photoshop on top of this. So what do I mean by that? Let me show you guys. Actually, yeah. Let me come in here and make sure these panels are the right color. Yeah, they're the right color. Okay. So up here in the where is it? Yeah, in the painting. No, painting, shading, where was it? Camera. Yeah, here we go. Under camera. The way this works is that whatever angle your camera is looking at, it'll quickly project out and save a PSD file. And so you could choose like an angle. So right now, camera angle 6, or was it 5? Yeah, 6 is what we're going to use because I want to paint on this side some logos and stuff. And so if you switch over to camera, there's some settings you need to set up. So right here in the quick projection settings, you'll click this, and this will give you the resolution you want. I want this to be pretty high res, so we're gonna go ahead and let's do 8K. Might even have to be higher, 16. And you choose a path where you want to save your file to. And so I want this to go into our textures folder that we made earlier. And inside of here, we'll just drop it in there. And so that's where I want it to go. Now for lighting, it bakes out whatever lighting you have on. We want this to be off. You could have it as a separate file if you want to kind of see how it is in the situation. And let me make sure. Yeah, everything's okay. The file name, we actually need to give this a name. So we're going to just call this quick project .psd, since I want this to be a Photoshop file. And we'll just hit OK. And so now that it's set up, and let's actually save our scene. If we come back up here, you can quick project what you want. And you could do a quick project the front, quick project through, quick unproject. And so what you do is up here, you quick project means that you're projecting onto the surface, and quick unproject means that you're unprojecting. So I already clicked unproject because this is a 16K file, so it takes a couple seconds to, or not even a couple seconds, maybe like a minute or more. But basically all you do is just click unproject, and wherever your settings and your location was, it bakes out that file this direction, And so if we come over here, here is our PSD file. And so then this file, what's awesome about Mari, this is what I love, because this is what makes it so powerful, and also makes it very powerful for Nuke and matte painting, is this file now, you can think of this as data that you can project back onto this surface. So if I make now, let's just make a new layer, just move this all the way to the top here. And probably a better idea to put it inside of what we're going to paint in, but we can move it around later. So if I open up Photoshop now, and I use this, let's fire up Photoshop, give it a second. And whatever you work on this PSD file, when you save it, you can then go back to Mari, and in here, you can choose Quick Unproject. And what it'll do is all that data that you painted, it's going to project it back onto the surface. And so there's different modes. There's Quick Project to the front or through. And so front is what we're going to want to quick project, unless you want the whatever you painted to go through and also paint the other side. So what I mean by that is, let's move this over here. So here's our 16K texture, right? If we zoom in here, and this is why you want it to be pretty high res, so that you have enough leeway to kind of zoom in here and work on it. You'll notice that that's the same layout. And so if I come in here and I draw whatever, let's just draw a line so you guys can kind of see what's going on. And actually it's better if you do it on its own layer, because if you do it this way, this data that's right here is going to get reprojected back down. Now if you don't care, then I mean it doesn't really matter. But let's just say we want it to, you usually want to paint on your own layer. So let's just draw some stuff, whatever. We'll delete this. We'll save it. Move that out of the way. And we go to camera and we go to quick project front. It's going to load that data that we just painted from that PSD file, and then it's going to project it back down onto our surface. And so give it a second to process. And there it is. And so it projected back down exactly what we painted. And it's on its own layer because I projected it onto this layer. So if I were to move this back down into our base layer, for example, it would only be on that layer that we selected. So as you guys can see, this is extremely powerful, because this means I could be at any angle, and let's say I'm more comfortable in Photoshop or whatever, or I have some better manipulation tools in Photoshop, I can quick project out, quick project it back in, and it'll fit right in. So that makes this really, really useful. So just something so you guys are aware of. I'm going to end up, actually let's delete this. I'm going to end up using that right now to get some details, some decals and stuff, maybe some sort of striping, painted striping onto this surface. So I'll be right back. I'm going to pause this because this could take, a while. And you guys don't really need me to be showing you that. You already know how quick project works, so you could get the idea. And so I'm going to quick project some stuff in Photoshop and then bring it back in, and we'll see what our result is once I quick project it back down, those details that I want. And after that, I think we'll be ready for export, and I'll show you guys how to use the material manager to export all of these into the correct format for ACES, and we'll load them into Houdini and see kind of what our results are. So I'll be back, guys. Alright guys, so I'm back. Spent a little bit of time just adding some details with the quick project, and I think we're good enough to throw this into Houdini. I mean, like I said, we could work on this for days and just really get in there and add textural detail. But you guys kind of get the idea. And so now I think that we're ready to export this. Let's just kind of rotate a light around. So let's disable our headlight that we're using and just kind of spin the camera around, or not the camera, the HDR. So you can see that we're getting this nice little detail from the bump. And so as we rotate that around, you can see that it's adding a lot of breakup inside of our shape. So that's cool. We'll turn on that rim light, rotate around, and yeah, you can see that the specular is working and stuff. So cool. I think this is good enough right here. So we're going to just save this. Let's save our scene. And we're going to export everything. So to export all our UDIMs and everything all in one shot, you can just go to the channels section, right click one of these channels, and you go to export manager. And so this, I think, was added in Mari 4 or 4.5. It's pretty recent. This is kind of new. And so this lets you choose all the channels that you want to export. Lets you choose the location. So I've been saving this out already when I was just checking it out earlier. So it gives you a warning saying, hey, there's duplicates in the saved location, just so you know. And so it gives you an export path. So we're putting it into our Mari folder, but instead of here, it's going to our exported section. And so that way we've got our own separate folder. And yeah, we don't need to export the object. I mean, it's optional. And all your options here are what you need. And so pretty much the only things that we need to switch or adjust, I should say, is the formats. Since we created the bump in the render, I mean not render, inside of Mari, we didn't import the bump since we didn't bake out bump. The format's different. It's just using the default format. We don't need to change this. It's a raw format. Bump is going to just read in linear. Metalness is going to read in linear. Roughness is going to read in linear. The only thing we had to make sure to change was our diffuse. So by default, if we click on this and you go up to the top, by default everything is set to same as source. And actually no, this is correct right now. So we're good to go, I believe. And the formats gives you 16-bit, the channel name, udim.exr, the EXR format, so if you guys want to use different compression formats, and just activate the ones you want. And so once you're happy with the naming convention, the formats, and which ones you want activated, you just have to click export all down here. So you click export all. It's giving me the warning because it's overwriting some older textures that I made earlier. And we're just going to say overwrite. So it's going to start processing. You'll see that there's this little processing bar down here giving you a percentage. This is going to go through and process all the UDIMs and bake them all down. So this might take a little bit. So I'm going to pause since this could take, I don't know, a couple minutes. And it seems to be going pretty quick, but still. So I'll be right back. And we're back. It took about, I don't know, 2 minutes. And so here's all our textures. They're all ready to go. They're named roughness with the UDIM numbers, metalness, diffuse. And if we want, we could, further rename these. And actually, I thought about it. I don't want to use TIFFs. TIFFs are just kind of, I don't know. I don't like them. And we're gonna use the smaller file format. As you guys can see, these are pretty huge, 60 megs. And so I think we'll switch over to converting these maps using DWA, the DreamWorks format. So we're gonna just come back in here, go to channels, export manager, and right here you could switch the format. So the compression format we're going to use is DWAA. Pixar 24 is a little better, but I think for our purposes DWAA is going to be plenty. So we'll switch that over. And we actually don't want this to be a TIFF. We'll be better off converting this into an EXR. And I thought the this would be okay. No, we got to switch this over to 16. We'll use the same compression format, same as source. The source. Okay, that's why. So let's hit close. So if we come down to our bump, we actually have our bump selected. You can change the format down here, and so right now it's using the 8-bit. So you know what? Instead of dealing with that, we'll just keep it that way. But I do want to render the other ones as what's it called? As Pixar 24s, and I'll just convert the TIFFs in Photoshop. And so we're gonna just go down here, and there is a way to convert that, the bit depth, in Mari. Where would that be? Convert channel. Here we go. Yeah. So we could switch this over to 16, and we'll just convert the bump. And I think it's already done. Yeah. So it already converted. Let's make sure nothing weird happened. And no, our bump looks the same. So let's now that that's converted, let's check down here, 16-bit. It looks good. We will now use the export manager, and everything should be okay. Yep, DWAA, 16-bit, EXR, ASUS, CG. So yeah, everything looks fine. So we're gonna just now have everything checked off and export. And so everything's being converted for us because the OCIO rules told it what to convert each format into, which is really neat. So all right, let's export all, overwrite, and actually let's, well, no, I already deleted the TIFFs, so yeah, it's gonna render everything out for us now. Give that a minute, and we'll be opening up Houdini and checking out our result inside of there. So I'll be back inside of Houdini. Alright guys, so here we are. We're back inside of our main scene here. And so I just made a new Redshift builder with the hero structure. And all I did was just drop down a Redshift material. And actually I need one more for bump. So let's bring this down. And let's drop down a bump node. And so this one's going to be for our diffuse, this is for our roughness, and that's for our metalness. And so we're going to plug this in right here. Plug that into our overall, our bump input, and we might need to adjust the strength, but we'll figure that out next. And so we got to select all of our nodes. Make sure that, and they should technically be in linear anyways, as is. And actually that's the wrong node. Since they're EXRs, Redshift automatically knows to load them in linear. But just want to make sure that none of them have an override. All right, everything looks good. And we need to change our path. since I copy pasted them into our main Houdini file structure now that we're further finished. And so we're going to use the $hip, and that should get us closer. Here we go to our, here's our scene file structure. So we're going to go to text for texture, and I made a new folder called hero structure, and inside of here we've got all our utums, and so we're going to load this in. Now Redshift doesn't know that this is a utum without a utum token. So right here where we have the $F, we need to actually turn this into arrows and type in utum. You could use capitals or not capitals. Sometimes I think in older builds capitals don't work, so just try either regular or capitalized, and then close the utum. And so what you end up with is your file name dot the little arrows enclosing the utum .exr. So we're gonna just, actually we don't even have to copy paste that, since we'll just copy this, and we'll come in here and now load up our hip. Switch that over, and for this we want roughness, and we'll just paste in the utum .exr. For our next one, we want to switch over again to metalness. We'll paste that in right there, utum.exr. And finally for our bump, we'll load our bump and paste that in as utum.exr. And we can rename these, so bump, metalness, roughness, and finally albedo or diffuse. And so these are all plugged in. Scoot that over inside of one RS material, and we did have a little bit of roughness for our diffuse for all of our shaders, so I just bumped that up to 0.1, and everything else is fine. We don't need to do anything. Just make sure you're using GGX, and this should now render correctly. Now the other thing to keep in mind is that we grouped the glass separately in our material tag on our object, and that's still using this shader up here, the procedural ones that we built earlier. So we're going to dive into the glass, and we're going to add in that same roughness node. And actually I should probably just copy paste it in. So let's come into here, grab our roughness, we're going to just copy that, go into our glass, paste that in, and plug it into our reflection roughness, and it should be good to go. And this is using IOR, but we could have had metalness, it doesn't matter, since there's no diffuse influence anyways. So let's jump back up and go inside of our hero structure. Make sure that this material is pointing to hero structure texture. Those groups indeed are all pointing to the same. Glass is pointing to glass. And so this should give us the correct result. We've still got our old material here using our old procedural shaders in case we need to switch between them or rebake our scene or whatever, right? So it's always a good idea to keep backups of stuff. And yeah, let's save this out and fire off a render. So let's open up the Redshift render view. And if you guys are wondering how to control, notice how it didn't start rendering the moment I clicked that. If you right click the Redshift render view, go to Edit Tool, and underneath the script, normally it says IPR. And so that when you have the IPR there, it means the moment you click this, it automatically starts rendering. I like to keep it off so that it lets me make any adjustments and stuff like that before it starts rendering, before I hit hit the play button. So right now I have it at 50% scale. And we're probably going to need to make adjustments to our bump strength. But let's just see what we get. So let's hit play. And this might take a little second to process all our textures and stuff, because I believe I deleted the texture cache not too long ago. And so that might need to reprocess all those textures. And let's go to object, or our material, and check out our bump. And it appears that something's rendering, but it's not rendering what we should be getting. Oh, there we go. Okay, it just took a little while to process all our textures. Okay. And you can see the stuff we painted. So like these scaffolds are a little darker. There's the striping. But it is subtle. Well, I mean, it's noisy, but you can see these little lines that are coming up. So let's actually do a full resolution render, and we'll just focus only on that area. So let's make a marquee here. And I might need to adjust the bump strength also. And we got a crash, unfortunately. It happens. So let me load that back up, guys. And we're back. I just did a quick little bucket render. I think we're going to need to do bucket renders anyways, just to see the details in here. So if we zoom in, we can see our bump. I'm going to try to adjust it and give it a little more strength. So I've got a little marquee set up. A render region, I should say, and I'm going to retest this while we adjust the bump. So let's jump into our shader. And another thing we're going to do is come in here, and for the MIP bias, we're going to make this -2 so we get a little more detail. Let's make this -2 also for our roughness. And this will just bias our MIP mapping to the larger resolution, so we might be able to capture a little extra details in there. And let's adjust our bump. So let's just try 2. Let's just see what happens. That might be way too much, but we'll see. So let's hit render again. And yeah, there we go. Let's see what happens. I probably should hide the VDBs and the birds and stuff just so we get faster feedback. But let's just see what happens. And again, our bump is still too weak. So let's just try a much larger number. Let's just do 25. And actually, let me hide the birds and VDBs just to save time. We'll hide all these VDBs and the birds. Well, the birds probably won't matter, so we'll just keep them. But the VDBs are taking a little longer to process the clouds. And let's render again. And we'll check other frames just to see how the light's hitting the bump. And this is going to be probably way too much bump. Yep, it looks like it's a little too much. But it does look cool. Well, no, maybe it's not. You can see that it gives us way more detail. I think this is too much, but you can see how added some nice little details into our structure here. So let's come in here and let's keep it like this first, and what we're going to do is let's try -1 or negative 0.5 and 0.5, and let's see if we can get some nice interplay of pushing in and out. Let's try that next. And of course, we might not, in the end, we might not even really see these details once we have motion blur and stuff, but it's a good idea to kind of have something in there for visual noise and breakup. So I think this is a little better. And I'm going to actually decrease the strength. Let's try 15. And we'll render this out again. And see what we get. This is a little more subtle, so I think this is a little better. You could see it still there, but it's not as obvious. And so from a distance, you could tell that there's some shape, something in there, but you can't really see what it is exactly. But that's good that we want that kind of breakup on our forms. And like I said, of course, if we were ever going to zoom into this object more, stuff like that, then yeah, we could come in here and texture paint everything in Mari further. So everything's set up for further detailing if we need it. Like this structure might need a little bit of bump mapping to kind of break it up. Same thing with this one. And let's try a different frame. So let's move maybe over here. See how the frame's breaking up. So we'll slide that over. Something like that. And let's hit render. Zoom in here. Yeah, you can see these little highlights right here on the edges, and then the dark lines and stuff. That adds a little, just an extra element of detail and quality that is subtle when you look at it, but you know, you can see that there's stuff going on in there. So I think this is good enough. And yeah, I think this is enough to move forward. So I think for our next step, it's time to fire off the renders, batch render all these frames, and see what we get, and take it into Nuke. And once it's inside of Nuke, we'll have, you know, the atmosphere that we did last tutorial, a little bit of that gradient and stuff, and the motion blur, and everything should, in theory, come together. So let's give that a shot. So I'm gonna set up a final render. Next, and I do kind of want to add a little bit of detail to the structure, so I think I'm going to quickly UV this even without UDIMs, just a single UV set, and I'm going to bomb it with the same texture, and I'll be right back. So I don't want you guys to see that, since that's going to take forever to record all over again, and the tutorial is already kind of long. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did to this. So I'm going to go in the object, quickly UV it using the game dev tools, export out the baked maps, take that into Mari, and then apply just quickly a bump all across the surface. I might actually be able to do it with the triplanar So maybe I'll try that inside of just Redshift and not even bother with all that. And if that works, then I won't bother with Mari. So I'm going to test that first, and I'll be right back, guys. Hey guys, so this is our result here. We took about 2 minutes to render, which is not bad. And this is a 4K render, so if we zoom in here, you know, we've got decent amount of details in here. I added a couple little lights. They might not even show up in the final, but just to kind of have a little variation in here. And yeah, so I think everything's pretty much set, good to go. I might adjust the depth of field. I don't know if it's on or not. And once we've got that in, I also added some minor details in here. So I ended up just using the triplanar and that same texture and just triplanar projecting onto these materials back here also. So there's a little bit of breakup, and you know, it's pretty convincing. From a distance it reads. The hero structure has much more detail and stuff, but this is where the eye is going to be focusing anyways. So I think we're pretty much at this point ready for our final render. So we're going to head over to our ROPS and just want to make sure everything's set. Yeah, that's fine. We've got our AOVs, we've got our puzzle mats that we used previously. Gonna check our motion blur. Actually, we don't need motion blur, so well, we do need it enabled, but we're going to be using motion vector AOV. So let's make our motion vector AOV. I think is it in here? Yeah, it's right here. So we've got our motion vector AOV. It's ready to go. It's outputting raw vectors. That's fine. In case I need to lay anything inside of Nuke into 3D space, it's going to be a good idea to come down here and add our world position. And our normal. And we might need bump normals, but I think, right, well, yeah, let's just do bump normals just to be a little more or actually object position. And we will also need our normals. We'll just get regular normals. And I think that's enough to basically give us all the AOVs we need. Yeah, we could make more. I think this is enough, though. We already were getting some good atmospheric haze inside of Nuke earlier, and we had our motion vectors. Adding just these, the world position and stuff, is just in case I need to lay out a 2D asset or something. And we still have our camera. I already have exported our objects as objects, so if I need to matte paint some further details in here, we can do that. But you know, like I said, this might be all blurred, so it might not even be worth it. So yeah, maybe adjusting the depth of field might be the last thing that I work on here, just to get it to match. So I'll be doing that. And for our frame range, we're actually going to want a strict frame range. So right now it's using everything, including our negative 150 that we're not going to end up using. So we need to break this. And so right now it's just automatically reading that. So we're going to delete channels, and we only want 0 to 150. And I believe I have Deadline installed. I updated Houdini recently. I need to check that. Submit to Deadline. Yeah, so it's Deadline's installed. So let's drop down a Deadline node, and it looks like it is not installed. Let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. Python. Okay. Yeah, I need to make sure that Deadline's installed correctly. It might not be from the looks of it. It looks like it's got some problems, so I'm gonna have to get rid of the Deadline node. I'm gonna have to. I'll just reinstall it off camera, and I'm gonna use Deadline to render this just because Deadline's easier to manage your frames and stuff. And yeah, I think everything's set. I might, like I said, adjust the depth of field a little just to kind of make it match. Let's come in here to our camera, our Alembic camera. And the we don't want to use the built-in f-stop and stuff because that's going to be all over the place because of the camera read. I mean, it might work, but it might not. But I'm going to adjust the depth of field myself just to get it as close as I can before our final render. And yeah, so after this, I'm going to fire off the final renders using Deadline, and we're going to move on to Nuke and check out the result of everything put together. So yeah, we've got our, this is a pretty fun project. We got everything in our pipeline with ASIS, and we textured our hero models. We laid everything out. We shaded. We added a flock of birds using particles. We have our OpenVDB clouds. So a lot of stuff going on. We've got our shadow catchers catching the reflections in the water with noise. Yeah, so be back inside of Nuke, guys. Alright guys, so here we are. We're finally inside of Nuke, and we've got everything already set up since the last tutorial. So all we had to do was just load in all our animation frames, and it's already going to follow through all our edits. And I just want to mention that's one of the great things of working this way. In a studio environment, usually, one person's doing one thing, one person's doing another thing. So while everyone works at the same time, so while the compositing guy is doing their edits and the modeling team is doing their detailing of the model and the texturing guy is doing that stuff, everyone's working at the same time and flowing through the pipeline. So while I textured this and edited this, luckily since we started with Nuke from the beginning, we already have kind of a lot of stuff already set up. So it makes just piping in your assets as you go a lot more convenient. And so everything's pretty much set up. It's good to go how we wanted it. It's in the right format. We've got our birds moving now. Waves are moving. We've got our atmosphere. And now we've got a little more detail here in our structure, in the hero structure. We've got the motion blur. And, overall, the shot's there. We've got some clouds now. Everything looks good, And it took a couple hours to render this, not too long. And this is pretty much what we ended up with. We've got a tracked camera. We've got everything kind of ready, And I think for a final little detail that would be kind of nice to bring in here is a little bit of smoke rising here. So I mentioned that I might do it in Pyro, but honestly, for this resolution and this distance, this is something better left off in compositing. So I think I'm going to end up just doing that in comp right now. And so what we're going to end up doing is making a little particle sim, and we're just going to use a sprite and have it give birth and fade out. So in order to do that, first we need to actually make a particle sim. So we'll keep this to the side, and our next step is to jump into 3D. So if you hit the tab key, we've got our 3D scene here. And we're going to actually use some of the data that's inside of here. So if we bring out using the points, the point cloud generator, I believe. Oh, no, this is the for the camera. We need the position to points, I think is what it's called. Yeah. This should be it. Display textured, surface points, and we plug in I believe our P for position here. Let me make sure this is it. So let's plug that in here. And actually I need to split out our world position and normals. So let me... Oops. And Nuke's actually going really slow right now, which is weird. I think the cache is a little big since I loaded all this. What do we need? Here we go. Need to split this out. And, okay, yeah, that's what it's called. The shuffle. There we go. Sorry, guys. Just, you know, it's a lot of things to try to remember. Sometimes I forget some stuff. So here we go. We need in our normal. And, well, we need our position in first. So let's check out what that looks like. Make sure. Yeah, so here's our position. Let me make sure our normal is, yeah, and our normal's in there. Object position. Yeah, okay. So this should be the layers I need. And if not, I'm going to be sad because I'd have to re-render the scene. Okay. And actually we need the beauty to plug in here, and let's zoom in here. Yep. Great. And actually I should, well, I don't, yeah, I should do that further down, but we'll see. I mean, it doesn't really matter since I could mask it in later, but actually let's plug, oops, that's why is it not giving me, God, it's really slow. Why is it not giving me the position option? Position of points, yeah. Display texture, surface point, surface normal. Yeah, okay, that's pretty weird. Huh. Let's load this in. And we should be able to just... No, that's object. Where is it? Roto, alpha, mask, forward, depth, deep, position. There we go. And surface normal. Okay, there we go. Normally when you plug in the beauty, it gives you another little arrow and you could split it, but for some reason it decided not to do that when I'd hook it in. I'm not sure why. So, well, as you can see, let's jump in through our, actually we need to bring in our camera from over here. Or we could load it in separately. Might just do that. Well, let's see. We'll paste that in down here. Make a new 3D scene. And why did it not? Okay. Should have our tracking data. Should. Plug our camera in here. And wow, Nuke is going real slow. Might have to restart the app. But now we should have our camera here. Yeah, so then here's our points. And you could see kind of the structures here. It's kind of hard to tell, but you can see that this is the structure down that way. And you can see that our other structure is way back there. Let's look through here again, and let's actually shrink our points a little bit so you can see this better. So you guys can kind of see. And so here's our buildings, right? And I think these back here are supposed to be our clouds, but it kind of didn't work out that well. And we don't actually want this to render, so we're going to turn that off. We just want to use this to visualize kind of what we're doing. And so we're going to need to make a particle sim happen over here. And maybe I'll move this to the left. Just so we don't have like, well, no, I'll just leave it over here. And we'll just have to deal with this giant green line for now. And we could load our camera directly since we wrote out the Alembic camera. So that'd probably be better, so that way it just keeps the scene a little cleaner. And yeah, so let's drop down a particle node. And so we need a particle emitter. And so this has a couple options to plug it in. The emission object and the particle that's being emitted. And so if we focus on this, and where is it? I think it's spawned way over here. So let's zoom in here. Where'd it go? I am not seeing it anywhere. Oh, it's at the origin. There we go. Where is it? Okay, right here. So this is our particle emitter. And actually, let's just... And it's still displaying, which is weird. Let's disable that. There we go. We'll just disable it. And so if we press play, it's not really doing much, but let's zoom out. You can see that it's trying to emit something, but not really emitting anything. And so you could put different objects in as the particle. So you could say cube, for example. We'll plug that in. And actually we need a emission object. Let's just do a sphere. Emit. And there we go. So if we zoom in here, you can see that there's little cubes being, whoa. Yeah, Nuke is being real glitchy. Being emitted. So that's pretty neat. Now, it works a lot like pops, like I showed you guys earlier. So we're going to emit, instead of the cube, we're going to emit a card, a 3D card, or just a texture really, that's going to be facing the camera at all times. And so I've actually got this little PNG. This is just like a Photoshop brush stamped of smoke. And we're going to just drag and drop that in here. And we're going to use this instead of our cube. So we're going to kill the cube. load that in. And it might be too small. Yeah, it's a little small, so we're gonna have to make that bigger. And actually the size is gonna change anyways once we move it up to the structure and we start tweaking it, but you know, for our purposes, let's make this bigger. And this actually might be related to the particle sim. Where's that at? Start at emission rate. Okay, under size here, we'll just for now make this 5, so it's big. And when we actually render this out, we're going to use the black as an alpha. And actually looking at the file, this one does not have an alpha. So let me load back in another version here. And this one appears to do it. Let's see. Yeah, so this one's got now an alpha. Now what we need to also do is do a drop down a blend matte. We'll drop this down, and this needs to be set to modulate, and that'll let us control the alpha over time so that we can make it fade as it gets older, as the particle age increases. So cool, now we've got some particles being emitted, some smoke particles oops. Particles being emitted, but they're being emitted everywhere in all directions, so we don't want that. So now we could use different forces like gravity. Let's drop down a gravity, plug that in here, and right now it's going to make them all go down. And so we need the opposite. We need it to go up. And we might adjust the strength. Let's just try 0.3, 0.4. And now they're pushing upward. And yeah, we could just come in here and start adjusting our particles, and we could use even a wind option, so we could push them in a direction and add air resistance, drag. So if we needed it to, I don't know, not only go up in Y, but to the side, which is what we're going to end up doing, something like that. We've got that as an option, and now we just need to set it up so it'll randomize rotations and fade out, and also change scale as it moves outward. So to do that, there's another node called the particle curve. And actually, let's move gravity and stuff further down, move that up here. And the particle curve lets you control several things like the size. So right now it's consistent, and we actually want it to be smaller when it starts and get larger. While it so small here and expanding is what we want. So let's select this end right there and bring that down. And that should be adjusting it throughout the particle's life, which is on. Yeah, that's kind of weird that it didn't do anything. Let's see here. Huh. Display. Yeah, textured. That's kind of weird. It should be changing it. And I added a little more to the life, and I realized that I do need, where is it? The size channel needs to be added to something, I believe. Oops. Because that is weird that it's not, yeah, giving me the curve. And actually, okay, here we go. Yeah. So I forgot to actually activate it. Silly little mistake right here. So make sure to activate size, otherwise it's not going to output at the this extra channel data. So what we want is we're going to need to really increase the size because it's overriding everything. So as you can see, it's 0 and 1, and we need this 1 value to be pretty much higher, because I don't think it takes into influence. Yeah, it doesn't care about this anymore, or the randomize. So we might not even need the particle curve. Let's see if we can work without it. And the size range, the range lets you randomize. I think we could be okay with the randomization. No, we're gonna need the curve from the looks of it, so that we can get that right look. So we'll start off with something even larger than that. Let's zoom out. Maybe something like that. And let's look at it with the wind. That lifetime's a little too long. So let's come down here. We'll make the life 15, 20. We'll add some range so that there's randomness to the life. We'll increase the emission to maybe 20. No, let's stick to 10, and we'll just make them bigger. The velocity, we'll add a little randomness to the velocity. A little random rotation velocity. And so resetting everything, here's kind of what we've got so far, a little basic setup. And so now we just got to move this into position and then adjust it to match our shot. And then we just got to composite the render frame on top of our base render that we have earlier. So I'm going to just move this over there and then adjust the settings until I like it. That might take a couple minutes. And then I'll show you guys the result. I'll hook up a camera, we'll render it and composite it back into our main scene. And I think after that, we'll call it a wrap. So I'll be back. Alright guys, so I'm back after putting everything together. Pretty much got it lined up right here where I wanted it, and got a little bit of smoke up here. And you know, it's moving with the camera, the size is small. Doing it in comp would have just been faster instead of actually having to do a full-on Houdini pyro sim. And so if we come in here, I organized our network a little bit, so it's just using this image, and I pre-multiplied it. I reformatted the size. I explained earlier the blend mat. Plug that into our particle emitter, and I'm emitting on 2 spheres. So there's a sphere back there. There's another sphere I moved up here, and I just merged the geo and connected it back to our particle emitter. And I have a couple curves here. So there's our size curve. If you check out the size, you can see that it's curving upward, so it gets bigger over time. Then we have our alpha curve, which is shrinking over time so that it fades out the older the particles get. I added a little bit of turbulence. There's a turbulence node, so just a little strength so that it kind of moves the particles around randomly. Gravity and a little bit of wind, and just change the direction to kind of match what I wanted. And so if we hit tab in here, you'll see that here's our smoke sims laid out using our spheres. So you can see there's one sphere and the other sphere up there. And something important, I'm not entirely sure, but I think Redshift spits out the position to points data in reverse. And so I had to actually build a transform geo node at the end, just to rotate all our points in -1z in scale. And so that just rotated our points around. So if you just bring this in by default, it would look like this, which is flipped. And so if we hit tab, it's not in the right position. So I had to make sure that this is using -1. And the camera that's coming in here is just the alembic camera that we wrote out in the beginning of the project. Goes into a scanline render, a constant just to keep our render the exact same size, 4K, that we needed. Added a little bit of blur at the end, and piped all that all the way down to the bottom over here. And so then I just used a merge, and for our mask I used the puzzle mat red, which is the channel for this building. So if I disable that, you'll see just to clip it right there. And I actually want it to overlap a little bit on this one, so I didn't bother masking that. And yeah, everything's there. It's good to go now. For final touches, if you were to render this out, and actually let's get rid of this transform node. You would render out these frames normally, send them to the colorist, so someone probably working in DaVinci Resolve or Nakoda or something like that. And I'm not some crazy colorist, you know, so I'm just going to use a LUT. And this is the result that we get after using just ASIS and keeping everything in ASIS. And you know, the dynamic range is still really nice. I mean, we've got some nice darks in here, some nice lights, and the color range is overall pretty nice versus just using sRGB. And so if we look in here, you know, you can still see those little details we added inside of Mari, so that's good. It just kind of adds more information in there instead of it keeping it just smooth. And so it's subtle, but it kind of, you know, it breaks up the shapes, which is something we want. Yeah, so I ended up just using a nuke. A lot of people don't know this, but inside of the Redshift folder, even if you're using the demo build, there's a folder called Data and LUT, and it contains a ton of really great LUTs. So there's just tons of open source LUTs in here that you guys can kind of play around with and explore, whichever ones work for you guys. And there's several that simulate camera responses and stuff like that. I've kind of settled on the Portra 400N. So I'm guessing that's a 400 neutral. So it gives it just a little more contrast and kind of gives everything a nice little saturated hue. Maybe I'll change my mind and I'll use something else. I don't know. Like I said, I kind of just want to explore. Maybe I'll tone it down. But I think you guys kind of get the idea. So I'm going to actually just rewind this and let it process just to make sure everything turned out fine before writing out our final render composite. But I think everything's, it's basically there. So if we hit play and let it just cache out everything, you can see that we've got some atmosphere on our buildings. We've got the clouds. Everything's just kind of assembled. So this is a full process to get this shot going, and hopefully you guys learned a lot of really cool stuff. This is a fun project. You guys get a lot of the assets, so the film plate, and I look forward to making more full projects like this in the future. I just got to go out and shoot more plates for everybody, and I think this was a great learning experience for a lot of people, both not necessarily beginners, but if you're pretty new to all these tools, and if you're more advanced, I think hopefully you might have learned something also. We tried to cover all the bases, so everything from preparing our plates to camera tracking to asset layout in Houdini, importing everything to work out there, baking, making some base UVs, exporting everything out to Mari, shading, bringing it all back into Nuke, getting everything laid out, using some of the Nuke techniques to add atmosphere, using our AOVs to control things a little more. So hopefully this was a good tutorial where everybody kind of learned a little bit of something, and I enjoyed it, and it was a fun 3-part series. For next month, I think I'm going to do something a little lighter. A lot of people have asked about refraction in Redshift and just a tutorial on glass and stuff like that. So, because a lot of people seem to have trouble with the Redshift glass, and so there's a lot of little tricks to make everything just look better. So I'll probably be covering that next month. And but yeah, I think this tutorial series is done. It's a wrap, and I think it was a good experience for everyone. So I'm going to pause this for now and let all this process so we can check out the entire animation in movement and see how everything turned out. So I'll be right back. Hey guys, I actually thought about making some more adjustments to the finished shot. So a little bit after our tone mapping step using the Redshift tone mapper, I came in here and decided to add a little bit of a glow to some of the specular. So in order to do that, I just jumped in here. I branched off and worked on the specular channel. So if we look at our specular here, you'll see that this is our raw specular channel. And so I came in here, added a little bit of glow. You kind of see it here. And we could, of course, adjust this further if we need, like that. And so the tolerance on the glow node controls how hot the pixel values have to be. So maybe something like that might be cool. And after that, I came in here and blurred the specular result. So that gave us this kind of a blur. And actually, come to think of it, I should probably crush our specular values. So let me, after the glow, let me come in here. And no. What I should do is grade it before it comes in. So if I drop down a grade here, in between. And we just adjust. And actually I need this to work on the specular. There we go. So now we're going to just adjust the black and white point so that only the hottest of spots get influenced. So we come in here and crush things a little bit like that. This should give us a little better of a result. And then if we come in here, boost up our tolerance a little, this will give us the glow only in a couple spots that I think it needs it. And then we come in here, blur that a bit, and we could always adjust the blur. An exponential blur would be better, but I think it's good enough. And then I merge that back on top. And let's switch back over to RGB A. So that just gives everything a little extra bit of that bloom. If we check out the merge node here, if I disable it, see that? And that just gives it a little nicer bloom glow where the sun's hitting up here and stuff. And that's just like extra little details. Then, you know, we dropped our reformat, and here is a LUT that I ended up liking the most. So this gives everything a little more contrast. It brings in some more warm, saturated colors. I adjusted the grade just a little bit, so I didn't want too much dark blacks in there. And then after that, I dropped a radial blur, or just a radial node, and use this as a mask to then drop inside of a grade node, which has this warm glow going off camera. So if I hit disable, you'll see what's going on. And that's just to kind of add that subtle hint of sun. And we could, you know, tone this down a little bit or bring it up more. But yeah, you guys kind of get the idea. And of course, you could adjust the colors here. So maybe if it's a little too on the purples, we can move it over, shift it back into the reds. I personally like it somewhere right there. And we could also increase the lift strength. So maybe something like that. We'll tone down the mix overall. And so yeah, that's kind of like just some finishing touches to kind of add just a little bit of glow and off-camera glow to our shot. And I think now it's all ready to check out our final pass through. So I'm going to pause this and let that kind of cache out and see what we get. Alright guys, so here we are, we're back. The playback isn't perfect. It's not 60 frames per second since it's processing so many nodes. But, you know, the result from what we can see already is pretty nice. We got the birds flapping their wings. We got the motion blur. We've got a little bit of bloom and glow on the structures. Our structures are tracking with the shot. You know, everything overall kind of worked out together. So yeah, that I think wraps up this tutorial series. Hopefully you guys learned some cool stuff and enjoyed, you know, going through this with me. And I hope to see any stuff you guys make using the plates or any of the stuff that I gave away. And I look forward to making the next tutorial. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming out for Redshift and Houdini 18 soon, so I'm going to have to be covering some of that stuff on my YouTube channel for shorter tutorials. But I think for this month coming up, we're going to touch on refraction specifically in Redshift and keep things a little lighter than this series, since this series was a little in-depth and heavy-duty. So, but yeah, thanks again for all the support, guys, on Patreon and on YouTube. I really appreciate it. Thanks.